There's an old story about a young man in Montana who bought a horse from a farmer for $100. The farmer agreed to deliver the horse the next day. However, when the next day arrived, the farmer reneged on his promise. "I'm afraid the horse has died," he explained. "I'm sorry, I should have mentioned it, but the horse was very old." The young man said, "Well, then give me my money back." The farmer said, "I can't do that. I spent it already." The young man thought for a moment and said, "Okay, then just bring me the dead horse." The farmer asked, "What are you going to do with that?" The young man said, "I'm going to raffle it off." "You can't raffle off a dead horse," the farmer exclaimed. The young man replied, "Sure I can. Watch me." A month later, the farmer met up with the young man and asked, "What happened with that horse?" The young man said, "I raffled it off, just like I said. I sold 500 tickets at $2 each and made a profit of $998. The farmer was amazed and said, "Didn't anyone complain?" The young man said, "Just the guy who won the raffle." So I gave him his $2 back. That didn't work as well as I thought it would. And that was an enterprising young man. He was less than honest, but he was very shrewd. We might even call him a little bit of a con man. In our gospel for today, we have another story of an enterprising and shrewd con man of sorts. This reading is perhaps the most confusing of all of Jesus' parables. As a result, this morning I need to do a little bit more teaching and maybe just a little less preaching. What's going on in this parable? Why did Jesus pick this particular person to be an example for his disciples? The story involves a rich man and a manager of his property. The rich man was probably some sort of an absentee landlord who hired the manager and entrusted him with the day-to-day oversight of his holdings and the collection of rents from his tenants. At some point, the rich man learns that this steward, this manager, has been squandering his property. Jesus doesn't tell us what the manager did wrong, but only implies that he was wasteful and careless with his employer's wealth. When the rich man confronts the manager and asks to see the books, essentially, he wants an accounting, he declares that the manager can no longer work for him, that he's fired. As the manager considers his predicament, he realizes that he is not cut out for manual labor, and he does not want to spend the rest of his life begging in the streets. So he has to find some other way out of this jam. Quickly, the manager puts a plan into action. He goes and sees his master's debtors, and he reduces the amounts each of them owe. Now, it was accepted practice in those days for a manager like this to take a hefty commission on the money he collected for his boss. So perhaps the manager in this story cut out his own commission, his own fee, in order to reduce the debtor's bills. In any case, by discounting what they owed, the manager curried favor with the debtors, and he guaranteed himself future favors for later. In the end, in spite of the steward's original misconduct, the master commends him for acting shrewdly. The manager's actions have not only restored his credibility with his boss, but the reduced debts also make the master look generous and kind. At the end of the parable, everyone involved, the debtors, they owe less, the master looks better, and the manager has saved his job. All three have benefited from the manager's shrewdness. In this parable, Jesus seems to be saying that when it comes to doing the work of God's kingdom, there is no reason that the disciples should not be as shrewd and as cunning as this crafty manager. Sure, they are supposed to be children of light, but that doesn't mean that they have to be gullible or naive. If a businessman can be shrewd while making money, how much more important is it for the disciples to be shrewd while building God's kingdom? However, at the end of our lesson, Jesus goes on to say that while the disciples should be shrewd, they also must be clear about who and what they are serving, because it is impossible to have two masters. They must be clear about where their ultimate loyalty lies. They cannot serve God and wealth. I heard a story the other day about a wealthy entrepreneur from Texas who came to visit his pastor one afternoon. The pastor could see that the man looked very troubled. The man said, "Pastor, I need to talk. I feel empty, dried up inside. In fact, for the first time in years, I'm scared. My doctor recently told me that I have fairly advanced congestive heart failure. It's getting worse, and I probably don't have much time left. I came to see you because I realized that with all the things I've done in my life, I haven't really paid God much attention for many years. The truth is, now that I face this situation, I have no spiritual resources. I have no inner strength to cope with this news. I have nothing to fall back on, to lean against. I've been successful all my life building companies, and I've done very well. But I realize now that I am poor in some of the things that count the most. The truth is, I'm empty, spiritually empty. I mean, I could pick up the phone today and call any bank in Houston and borrow any amount of money to do whatever I wanted to do. Just on my name, Pastor. Do you realize that? Just on my name, I could borrow it on my name alone. The man leaned forward and put his hands in his head and said, "I guess there are some things you just can't borrow or buy." All of us have to ask ourselves, what master are we serving? Where are we investing ourselves? Are we spending our time and our talents building God's kingdom in our own way, or do we spend more time and energy building a comfortable life for ourselves? Most of us in this congregation have amassed large amounts of wealth when compared to many, many, many people in this world. We represent the top 1% of the world's population. But have we deposited as much, if not more, in our spiritual banks? Have we built up our relationship with Christ with the same energy and purpose as we have pursued other goals? Have we built the kingdom with the same passion that we have built our careers? If not, then we have been chasing false idols, counterfeit gods that will disappoint us when all is said and done. Jesus teaches us that we have to be smart and we have to be shrewd as we make our way through this life. Our world is a tough place, but our ultimate allegiance must be to God and God's work in the world, not to our own achievements. Because you can only serve one master, and there is only one master who will save you in the end. Amen.